And I think love is a verb. I think community is a verb. I think leadership is a verb. And that verb means you're going to have to take some action. Leaders cannot be called leaders if they are not having people behind them who can actually even teach them something. I think leadership shows like vulnerability, willingness to grow, being a forever student. That for me is what a leader is. I'm Luvvie Ajayi Jones, and I am a writer, a speaker, a professional troublemaker, and you are watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Hey, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with the incomparable Luvvie Ajayi Jones. Luvvie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
How I got this job was through a series of fortunate accidents. I thought I was going to be a doctor. Growing up, that was the dream. And I ended up taking Chemistry 101 my freshman year of college, where I got the first and last D of my academic career. I instantly dropped the doctor dream and realized I don't even like hospitals. So I thought the dream would be psychology. So I actually got my degree in psychology. But the semester that I got that D, I ended up starting a weblog. That's what it was called back then, because my friends peer pressured me to doing it. So I had my whole college career documented in this blog where I was talking about exams I wasn't studying for, whatever roommate drama I was having. And what I didn't realize was happening was my real purpose was taking shape. So when I graduated with my college degree, with my psychology degree in 2006, I deleted my college blog and started awesomelyluvvie.com, which I still have. And instead of talking about my undergrad life, I was talking about life as I saw it. TV, randomness, race, politics, shenanigans, just whatever I felt like talking about, I did on this blog. And I went to work 9 to 5 as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit, and I'd come home and write on awesomelyluvvie.com. So over the years, more and more people started reading this little website of mine. In 2009, it actually won its first award, and it was for the best humor blog in the Black Weblog Awards. April 2010, I got laid off my marketing coordinator job, and I did not take it as a sign that I was supposed to focus on the blog. I was like, you know what? While I look for a full-time job, I will do the digital communications work that I was doing for my full-time job for small business owners, entrepreneurs, other bloggers to make money. So I was doing that, still sending out my resume. And there were a few times when I wanted to delete the blog because I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should pay more attention to looking for a new job than doing this blogging thing. But every time I'd want to do that, somebody would send me a note that's like, hey, I was reading your blog when I was sitting in the waiting room as my mom got chemotherapy, and that's why I wasn't crying. It was like God and the universe were giving me these signs that was like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. So after a year and a half of looking for jobs, I actually got credentialed to do press coverage at the Academy Awards in 2012. So I was on the red carpet and backstage access. So I'm standing next to journalists from the BBC. I'm standing next to folks from CNN. And here I am as Awesomely Luvvie in the same place as them. And it was then that I finally felt convicted to start calling myself a writer. I wasn't just a blogger. I wasn't just a person who had this website. I was someone who was using her words to move people, to make them think critically, to make them feel joy, and to compel them to take action to leave the world better than they found it. And I was finding myself in the rooms with people who had these big titles. So I finally was like, okay, I am a writer. I am purposed to use my words for the greater good, in addition to using my work as a marketer. So
Let's put a timestamp on that because I want to just go back and maybe delineate for those who maybe are new to, that decade. I mean, you're talking about 2009, 10, 11, 12. That was a very special time. That was really when, we were in the heart of the Great Recession. Those are hard times. And like a lot of people, whether you're displaced, downsized, fired, let go, whatever, you're out of work. A lot of people were taking up writing or blogging at that time. Blogging was just coming onto the scene. Twitter is just a couple of years old, so people were microblogging. Blogs had just come onto the scene, and it was really becoming a platform where people could express themselves. Uh, you had some big time bloggers. I think about Seth Godin, who's had his blog forever. Um, but really, you know, writers and thought leaders like you were just starting to sort of come into their own and get validated, legitimized, and that was a special time.
It really was. So I think about the fact that I'm an early adopter of all the social platforms. I've been on Facebook since July 2004. Facebook started in February 2004 because I went to a Big Ten. So it was like they opened up to Harvard, Ivy Leagues, and then Big Tens were next. And one of my friends that I went to college with, I think was friends with Mark Zuckerberg. And they were at the same dorm. So when Facebook started and they opened up to Big Ten, she told me, she's like, "So have you joined the Facebook?" And I was like, "Okay." So I end up joining, and I'm basically the gateway to a bunch of my friends joining. Twitter, I joined in September 2008, and then Instagram I've been on since 2012. So with the work that I was doing in blogosphere and also being just a natural digital native, it worked to my benefit because even though at that point it was still really truly the wild wild west, I was using social to promote my work. Even if I don't know how many Facebook friends I had at that point, but I'd be like, I just posted something and you just drop a random link. So all of that actually did help in the growth of my blog. And I didn't realize how strategic I actually was being. I was like accidentally strategic. And yeah, back then, because blogging was not considered this major industry, I was actually able to write without strategy, without deceit, without any type of like pretense, because I wasn't writing with the intention of something bigger coming from it. I was writing purely because I love to write. And I think that was a gift because it gave me the practice of speaking the truth out loud in public. And yeah, during those years of blogging, I think everybody was truly their authentic selves, like in the way that you could say was most possible, because again, none of us really had these grand expectations of what would come from us doing what we were doing. And I think that gave it the pure intention of it gave it strength, and it gave it authenticity that sometimes is missing now from people when they're just starting today.
I agree. It was a very exploratory time. Can we go back in the chronology a little bit to young Luvvie? You talked about you wanted to go into medicine. I kind of felt the same way when I was younger. So, we're starting to have this Venn diagram that overlaps a little bit between us. Um, did you get influence from your parents? What did your parents think, and did they steer you in any particular direction? I ask that because, you know, there's a lot of people who watch this show of all different ages. I think the common thread among all of them is that everyone's trying to find their passion, their true calling, their element. Like whether that's the fish to water, bird to the air. It's like, where do I belong? And so, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Nigeria, and a lot of Nigerian parents, they want you to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and I picked doctor because I was like, I do want to help the world. I want to help people. So 5-year-old me was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. And I was really bookish and nerdish, and so it tracked. And coming to the U.S. at 9, it was one of the things that brought with me was this dream. But I think I didn't realize how much it wasn't my dream until I went to college. When you hear something enough, you start forgetting that it was other people's voices that might have introduced it to you, not yours. So
Did your parents want that because they wanted to make a world a better place, or they wanted you to have some stability in your life and they knew that medicine could provide that for you?
not sure what the motive was, because I think it's just a very commonplace occupation that a lot of immigrant parents want for their kids, because it's probably the stability of it all, the fact that you're guaranteed a paycheck. It is very noble of a profession, so I can see all of that tied in one being the reason. And especially if your kid is capable, like, really smart, and they can handle it, yeah, you definitely want them to be this thing. But I think because back then, also there's how now that we can create careers we want almost out of the thin air, that was barely the option. So I think that was a big part of that. Yeah, I think that was a big part of that, but definitely was not supposed to be a doctor.
Is that why you also ended up at a Big Ten school? Because that was sort of a path, like sort of a traditional path?
No, no, I chose Illinois because a lot of my friends were going, because it was far from home, but also still close enough because it was 3 hours away from Chicago. Same school colors as my high school. So I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go there. So yeah, I ended up at a Big Ten accidentally. I could have ended up anywhere, but I was just kind of like, oh, I'll go to Illinois. I didn't care that it was a Big Ten. I didn't even really know what Big Ten meant. But it worked out. So, because I could come home on weekends if I felt like it or not. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds of still being tied to home, but not being at home. But yeah, no, when I got that D, I think it was a clear moment of realization for me that going into the sciences is not something that I was passionate about, and honestly, not something that I was good at. I'm not typically a quick quitter. Like, I am the person who's like, if it's important to me, I will see it through. The fact that I instantly quit let me know that it wasn't for me to see through. Like, I did, it was very much unlike me to be like, oh man, I faced this roadblock, drop the dream. So the fact that I was so compelled to do it actually in itself was letting me know that I was choosing the right decision. I was making the right decisions to walk away from this path that I set for myself.
Yeah, can I just point out another really important lesson you just said? It was subtle. So for anyone who missed it, signals are so important. Sometimes the signals are subtle and you miss them. They roll right over you. And sometimes they hit you right in the face. Um, I also think what you're saying is really important too, to point out that sometimes you got to try it on for size to see if it fits or not. And once you get it on, you're like, this doesn't fit as well as I thought it would. And then, you try something else on. But that self awareness to know when to cut bait, and try another line or whatever metaphor we want to use, I think is super an important lesson. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important. We hear a lot. We hear the messaging that we get a lot is like, never quit. And I'm just like, that's actually the wrong messaging. I think we need to be okay with pivoting when the pivot is necessary. And it's not that you quit at the drop of a dime because something is not working out in the moment. Oftentimes when something is not working out, it means you have to adjust something. Like if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and it's not working out, you haven't changed anything, you keep trying, that's madness. So at the minimum, like even if I didn't drop the chemistry major, maybe I should have been like, oh, let me try biology. But I instantly was like, nope, nope, science is my problem. Like I'm like, I don't think this is my realm. This is never something that I enjoy doing. Like I knew I did not enjoy it. It'd be different if I was bad at it, but I was like, I still enjoy the process. I hated my science classes. I was not a fan. And I actually really tried that semester. Like I went to my TA, I got extra tutoring, and I was the kid who was used to coasting through school. I never had to try that hard to get A's and B's. And
You're intelligent. You had the smarts.
yeah, like so when I was like, oh snap, I got a D and I actually tried. I really tried. Oh no, this is probably not for me. So I do think we need to pay attention to moments when we are being asked to pivot, because sometimes the pivot is going to set you on the path that you're supposed to actually be on.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Are you an extrovert?
No,
'Cause
I am not an
you
extrovert.
seem like an extrovert.
I seem like an extrovert because I can be social and I am not shy, but I am absolutely an introvert. I prefer my own company. I am the person who, if I go to a party, within an hour, I'm ready to go. If I do a lot of peopling, I will be at home for the next 3 days on my couch, just avoiding people. And people always assume I'm an extrovert because I'm a speaker, and most of the time before COVID, I'm on a plane. I average 110,000 miles a year of travel. And I'm on all types of stages and I'm signing books and I'm taking pictures. And so people assume, and I'm on social, I'm very social on social, and people assume like, oh, you're an extrovert. And I'm like, oh, absolutely not. Like what you don't see is after I get back from my trip, nobody sees me for 3 days. After I signed 300 books at a book signing, I am in my hotel room for the rest of the day and I order in. Restaurant, I'm not going to that. So yeah, absolute introvert.
Yeah, we're we're kind of cut from that same cloth. I feel you on that. Can I tell you a funny story about Guy Kawasaki since we share that friendship? So when I met Guy for the first time, so I'm an introvert too. Have you read Susan Cain's book, Quiet?
I have not, but I know of Susan Cain. I've watched her TED Talk, but I haven't read her book yet.
Highly recommend it. I mean, it was so insightful to me just to understand myself, but to also understand the so there's hybrids, right? There's introverts, extroverts, and then there's the ambivert, which is sort of maybe what you and I are. We're on when we need to be on. We're off when we prefer to be off. Anyway, so I'm talking with Guy, and love you. I'm not kidding you. And I've told this story to Guy, but maybe not publicly. So um, I just thought he was I just thought he was the worst. I really thought he was my worst interview to date for sure, hands down, easy. I was just like, who is this guy? Such a jerk. Like he was just like so like he's giving me like these one word answers and just sort of like I felt like he was like what do you call it when you're on the witness stand and the like he was a very unwilling participant. He was almost like defiant. And I was like, what is the deal? Like, you just don't like me, or like you're just this, you know. Anyway, I didn't like him at all. And then we're done with the interview, and I was like, that was probably the worst. And a few months goes by, and I don't know, he had another book coming out, and he's written all about the fact that he's this introvert. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, Guy's not an asshole. He's just an introvert. Like he was very quiet. He was probably maybe he talked himself out that day and he just needed to recharge his batteries. But I don't know. I say that for other introverts and extroverts because sometimes you don't know who you're talking to, and I totally misjudged him at first, and then when I realized that he and I are a lot alike that way, I definitely give him a second shot. I apologized to him, and I sort of looked at him through a different lens. But it's so funny, right?
That's an important distinction because I do think people, so like when people meet me in public, I think sometimes they're expecting me to be very high energy. Like they're expecting me to be, yeah, but like they're expecting me to be like really kind of like high energy, very like hey, but in like I'm very much the person who will walk into a room and observe before saying anything. Like unless it's like a room with like my friends, like my closest friends. But if I walk into a room or an event, I'm very laid back and just like I'll observe the room. I don't have to bring the room to me. Like I don't have to center myself in the room. So people tend to think like, "Oh my God, I met Luvvie and she was very like funny acting about it." And I was like, no, it's not that I'm funny acting. It's that like I don't present in a particular way that people are expecting because I'm the person who's showing up with the, on the TED stage and they're expecting this type of special, like really social energy. And I'm like, no, in a room where I don't know anybody, I'm just watching. I'm just kind of like sitting behind and seeing what's happening. So yeah.
Do you get starstruck? Like, have you met anyone who you would really, really admire, like one of your heroes or someone who's famous or something like that? Do you get starstruck?
Not particular. Like I don't get starstruck where I'm like stumbling over my words or where I like squeal. I definitely don't do that. I've met Oprah. I've interviewed Oprah. I've been chosen as part of her Super Soul 100 list, and she's the one who was the test because that is the person who I had on my list is like the person who I admired the most, right? And I didn't freak out. I was just like, really nice to meet you. It's so good to finally be in the same, to actually for us to actually finally meet because we've been in rooms together at least 12, 13 times over the years. But I'd always been clear that like, huh?
What was she like? Was she generous with you off camera, or?
Yeah, absolutely. She was warm. Like she is who she is. Like she gives this really calming energy too. That's the other thing that makes it hard to. For me, I was like, I don't see how people can fangirl over Oprah because her energy is calming. Like you instantly see her and you feel grounded. It's really interesting. I think she's amazing. So when she had me as part of the Super Soul 100, she threw a brunch for those of us who were on the list. So this list had like Deepak Chopra, Ava DuVernay. So I was in a room full of people who I should have been fangirling over, but I was like, you know what? These are regular people who happen to do extraordinary things. So walked up and introduced myself to everybody, had great conversations, and then met her. And she was just like, so good to meet you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you actually wanted me to be here on purpose. So yeah, no, I don't fangirl too much. I always want to like put myself in the space of this person's a regular person who just did something really extraordinary.
It's interesting, right? Like it seems like the more confidence, the more power, whatever that you've got, the people who know how to use it correctly, they act the opposite. They act like they have the least amount of power. They're most chill. To me, I think of Oprah, and I think like she's the chairman. Like she's just like walking around like she got nothing to prove. She's in charge. Like you said, she's grounded. That's my perception. Like chairman. Like
Yeah, and I think that's why I actually think that's why it's important to find your grounding more and more as you're leveling up. Those are not the times for you to get louder necessarily, like, but it's time for you to kind of be more assured. And it's why if I'm in a room, I don't feel the need to be the loudest person there. I don't have to be the center of attention. So I can be in a room and I'm just watching what's happening in the room because I don't need to be the one. And I think it's okay to kind of be comfortable to step back sometimes.
so, how do you balance that idea, that principle, that philosophy with the title of your book, which is like professional troublemaker? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so yeah, my book is talking about how we should all be professional troublemakers, which is ultimately we are people who are committed to elevating the rooms that we're in, to disrupting the world for the greater good, and to saying and doing the hard things, especially when it's necessary. And I am the person who's in the room who's saying, hey, let's think through that idea more, that campaign idea, so it's more thoughtful. I think professional troublemakers are the ones who will call out your uncle at dinner for making an inappropriate joke, or they're the friend who will say, let's have a hard conversation. Now, the troublemaking of it all is not like you're walking in a room and throwing a bomb, or you're walking in a room and instantly yelling and making noise. I think you are clear that when you are in a space, what's happening there is something you are proud of. So sometimes if troublemaking, it looks like me stepping back. So if I'm on a panel, which is why I actually don't do panels anymore, because I am hypersensitive about taking up too much space on a panel because I can easily, very easily. I know what I know. I'm very like magnetic and I know this. So I can actually dominate a panel very quickly. So I make it a point if I'm on a panel, if I answer the first question, I won't answer the second. I'll wait until somebody else answers it and kind of give that space. And what ends up happening is people afterwards will say, we wish we heard more from Luvvie. So I'm like, you know what? This is why you should just come to my keynotes. But troublemaking in rooms is also about knowing how much space you take up, right? And also knowing what that space could do to make somebody else's life easier. So sometimes who I am in a room is a person who is challenging things because I know I need to because somebody else is not going to.
Do you have an example that you can think of, maybe from the book, a case study, or?
Yeah, well, even in general, like I make trouble often by just speaking up about what I see. So I was once invited to keynote an internal conference for a company that was saying that they were working on being more diverse in their initiatives to make sure that Black and brown employees internally felt welcome, and they really wanted me to come speak. They saw my TED talk, and I was like, okay, great. So they booked me, and then about 2 to 3 weeks before the event, they sent me a flyer and said, we'd love for you to share this on social media of you and the other speakers. And it was me, Black woman, next to 6 white men.
So it's like,
And I
look at
said,
us doing the right thing.
yes. And I was basically the right thing, right? So I sent an email, an actual really thoughtful email, and I said, I'd love for you to look at this flyer and see that for me as a Black woman, it actually makes me uncomfortable because it feels like I'm being tokenized. One, you all actually said you wanted to prioritize diversity. Having one Black woman on your stage when you have 7 other speakers is not diverse, right? That's
Out as if you're endorsing it.
correct. Like, look at us. And I said, your employees would also not feel comfortable because if you are trying to prioritize the care of the people who work internally, And they see this stage. I'm the opening speaker, so they see this black woman in the beginning of the day, and then the rest of the day is 6 white men speaking to them and speaking at them. So I challenged that. And what they did is they replied back, the CEO replied back with, well, maybe this year isn't the right year for you to come. And ultimately disinvited me.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, well, I already have the deposit. So that's staying. But it was an interesting moment because
Interesting.
when we,
Interesting. Well, I mean, interesting is a euphemism for that's bullshit.
it was utter bullshit. And it was definitely a clear moment where I said, professional troublemaking and being the person who wants to disrupt for good, it can absolutely cost you, right? But I did not feel like I could be quiet and honor who I say I am and be the person who's proud of the room that she would be in. Being the only in a room is not a point of pride. It means I need to figure out how to get more people. And I actually recommended, I said, let me know if you'd like to know what other amazing speakers who are in marginalized intersections could also come in that day. Because I didn't just give them the this is the problem. I gave them the I can also help you solve this. So being a troublemaker, being the person who is a disruptor, sometimes it will come with cost. It's not just like happy-go-lucky, everyone's gonna love it. But at the end of everything, I wanna be proud of who I am. And then I wanna make sure my actions line up with who I say I am. And so it was necessary to be said. So that's why I wrote this book, is I want us to understand that like our work in this world is gonna come with some costs, but it is knowing that for us to build the world that we want to live in, for us to be the person who we say we want to be, for us to, create rooms that we would love to exist in, we're going to have to put certain things on the line. And a lot of us are people of privilege. And in that moment, I had privilege. I wield a lot of privilege, even though I'm a black woman. I am not poor. I'm Christian. I am straight. I have college educated family members. I was never the first person to go to college in my family. So I wield a lot of privilege, and I have to use it. I have to use it to make sure that I am part of this world that I want to be proud of. So it's necessary for us to do it.
Let's put a cap on that case study. And to me, it's fairly obvious what the company should have done, but I would love to hear your perspective on it. So maybe if you're speaking to companies like, hey, this phrase, you can't fake the funk, comes to mind. Like these guys were faking it, and it was obvious. They revealed their true colors right away when they said, oh, never mind, if you don't want to play our game. So maybe talk to companies and tell them what that company should have done when you were trying to course correct them.
So that company should have actually listened with less ego. That CEO for sure came with all the pride and ego and felt he was indicted in the critique of this day. So moving with less ego and realizing that the things we don't realize aren't necessarily things we have to take personally. So he might not have even noticed that there were 6 white men, because for him, that's just default, right? So me pointing it out was an opportunity for growth. So that CEO, the best thing he could have done is to say, oh my goodness, you're actually correct. Could we get 3 recommendations from you to really make sure this day feels diverse, is diverse, has diversity of thought, expression, and content? And I would have been like, absolutely, here's 3 amazing speakers. I would have given them 3 amazing speakers. And they weren't gonna all be black women. There would be a black dude. There'd be a Latino person. There'd be somebody. It would actually represent what the world looked like, so their employees can show up better. The reason why people end up in companies and companies go, well, we don't know why this thing happened, or whenever a moment of backlash happens, a public moment of backlash at a company, like a campaign comes out and everyone's like, why would you get this messaging out? I always ask, who was in the room who knew this would not go well, who did not speak up? There's usually at least one. That person did not speak up because they've seen somebody else be punished for speaking up. They are afraid of the fact that they will stand on an island by themselves. And 3, they don't think that they would be listened to or even welcomed. That person being quiet is a liability to your company, because when you don't have the troublemakers, the people who are saying, hey, let's rethink that, who is watching for your blind spots? Who's making sure that what shows up in the world is something that they are proud of? So when companies are not celebrating troublemakers, are not welcoming the challenges, Adam Grant calls it the challenge network, the dissenters. When you're not welcoming them into your company, you're putting yourself in constant backlash moments. It's a liability that's gonna cost you, because if everybody in the room is like, yes, 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 let's do it, who is the person who's asking the questions that others will ask, others who are not in that room? So yes, they should have listened to me and fixed that. Because when people see, when chief DEI officers are hired, usually they're hired and they end up leaving within a year or two. It's because you can bring me in as a black woman to be your DEI person. I can bring in black employees, but if within the company, once they're hired, they're gaslit, they're punished for their way they express something, they're called difficult in their reviews because they use their hands a lot or ask questions, those people will leave. So for companies, it's expensive. You're losing money by not welcoming diversity of thought, by not celebrating your troublemakers who are going to look out for you, by not being open to change, and by constantly thinking being challenged is an indictment of you. So yeah, I'm sure that company, which is funny enough, is like, I haven't heard from them. I haven't heard about them. But I'm just like, that can't be the way it is. Because if they dealt with me in that way, imagine the person who's internal, who will point out something that's not okay. That person will probably get put on a review and get fired in 6 months for saying something.
What comes to mind is a real tragic story, a personal story, and the Wall Street Journal just covered this, of the Zappos CEO Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh is a victim of what you're talking about. He surrounded himself with yes men. Women were there too, obviously. Even it sounds like from the write up, his brother was there. But everyone was on the payroll, and everyone was living high, literally, with Tony. And if you weren't, I mean, and in their defense, if there is any, if it's defensible, Tony would cut them off if they didn't agree and support his dangerous lifestyle of what eventually cost him his life. But there's a perfect example of people should have been troublemakers. People should have been standing up, had the courage to say, Tony, you're walking dangerously to the edge of the cliff. I don't care if you cut me off from your life or you cut me off from your payroll. Like, you know, you're
That's what I'm saying, is that, there's somebody somewhere right now who is saying, "Ah, I wish I would have said something," or "Ah, I wish I would have done something." There is that person who is now convicting themselves because they knew they should have done something more. I want to be the person who, at the end of my life, I'm not sitting here like, I should have done some that. Gosh, I should have said something. I want to live in a way where I am proud in my sunset years to know that I did everything I could, whether or not it got me liked or not, that I moved with integrity first and did what was hard, especially when it was hard, because it was what was right. So that's why I want people to be more open. If you look around you and you realize nobody ever tells you no, it means you have made yourself into the person who can't be told no. It means you have proven to other people that you challenging them is like them challenging you is some type of liability, and you have made yourself into a monster.
yeah. I totally agree with you, and I really hope that I'm that person when I'm called to do the right thing. I really hope that I'm that right person. I hope that I've done it throughout my life, but you know, I think maybe what I'm thinking of right now is that I think your book's important to read to sort of get prepared to be in that mindset. I was just watching, it was a New York City subway violence, against Asians, and some man on the subway was beating up an Asian man, and of course I was disturbed and shocked. But the thing that disturbed me most is everyone was sitting around watching. I was like, what? What? I mean, if I'm on that subway, I'm gonna try and break up that fight just because it's a fight. I don't care what the color of their skin, it's like there's a fight between two humans. That can't happen on a subway. But everyone just watched it, and the guy got choked out, and then everyone walked off the subway like, Not my problem.
That is the bystander effect, which is so dangerous and which is also part of the reason why I wrote this book, because I want people to feel convicted for the moments when, like, if the next time that shows up around them, they do something. So the bystander effect is the idea that the more people you think will do something, the less you're likely to do it. So then we see, well, there's 30 people around, they'll stop it. So then we just sit back and wait. So then we spend our whole lives being bystanders, and we're watching the world become a dumpster fire, and we're thinking everybody else will fix it. No, no, no. Why not you? We are constantly handing the baton to everybody else to do the work. Imagine if all of us felt convicted. Imagine if 20 people got up and said and spread that fight apart. That person wouldn't be harmed to that point. Everybody was waiting for somebody else to do something, and that's the problem. We cannot continue to live in this world and want the world to be better and think everybody else's job. Like, it's so wrong, and it's so, but it's the way we operate. It's the way everybody's moving. Everyone's thinking, well, that person will speak up. Which is why whenever I'm in a room and people are like, well, Luvvie will say something, there are days when I actually won't. And I'll say, let's test this out and see what happens when I don't say something. Let's see what happens when I'm not the one who's asking the question that's tough. Oh, it's all gonna go to hell? Well, shit. Okay. But I think there needs to be where if one person is missing in the room, who's usually the one speaking up, it shouldn't be where nobody else is speaking up. Everybody should feel deeply obligated to be like, okay, I am part of the society. Therefore, if I don't like what's happening, I need to do my part. And people are not doing their part. People are not doing their part. And troublemakers that exist already are exhausted, right? I'm hoping with this book, I create more troublemakers.
Yeah. Well, so I agree with you. I don't like this absolute thinking though, because I think there are a lot of people doing good. The other example that came to mind was, I don't know, was it 2 years ago? Someone came in with extreme violence and shot up um, uh, a Muslim place of worship. Maybe they burnt it down, something bad. It was white supremacists or something did it. And then the Jewish community said, you guys can come over and worship in our synagogue, right? Like basically they said the Muslims are welcome inside our place of worship because your place of worship got burnt down, which I love because you're right. It is always like, it's us versus them, or it's like, that's not my problem. But I do also want to promote this fact that there's a lot of people out there quietly and maybe not so quietly sometimes doing great things. And that's what I think your book is also promoting. It's like, do good in the world, step up, step up to the mic, step up to the plate, step in, say something, speak up. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing though. There are a lot of people doing amazing stuff in the world. But there's a lot of people who are not. And there are a lot of people who choose silence in times when they should not. There are a lot of people who choose inaction. And I always ask myself, will I be proud of my silence when I walk out of the room, or will my inaction convict me? So this is not necessarily about everybody, helping somebody else get a new house of worship. I think when we think about courage and troublemaking, it's especially in the small moments, right? In the tedious moments when we might not think it matters that much. Because if you don't do it in the tedious moments, in the small, tiny moments where you're being asked to, what practice and what muscle do you have to do it in the major moments when now it's presented to you? So in the rooms that we are in, even if it's saying, hey, let's rethink that, or hey, let's do something else because that messaging is not as thoughtful as we want it to be. Or literally asking a friend, hey, you've hurt my feelings. Can we have a conversation about this? I think those matter just as much as the big moments when you're like, oh my God, I have to challenge a system. So we have to do our part every single day in the spaces that we are in. I'm not asking everybody to become Superman. I'm not saying save Gotham. But if you can save the room that you're in, if you can give somebody $2 who doesn't have it, if you can make sure the intern's voice is heard in the meeting, that's absolutely part of what shifts the world. There's all types of domino effects that come from us taking action in those small moments. So I'm definitely not discounting those moments.
And I love this idea of micro and even looking inside yourself. I think maybe uh, I have a daily battle with myself every single day. Like I'm trying to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday. Sometimes I am, and sometimes I am not. And you're right. I think even this little stuff that you're talking about could just be these little things that we do for ourselves. If someone says something that hurts our feelings, or if it's inappropriate, I'm guilty of this all the time, just letting it go instead of like, you know what, that wasn't very nice, or that wasn't appropriate, or so I think even speaking up for ourselves, as well as the intern, is just as important, because all those little things. And this is something that I've thought a lot about. This idea of courage. To me, courage is a muscle. Like the more you use it, the stronger it gets. The opposite is also true. When you're not using your courageous muscle, you get weak and flabby, and you have that opposite effect. But the more that you are this troublemaker, it's a positive connotation of stepping up, saying the right thing, doing the right thing. It gets easier to do, right?
Yes, yes, and it becomes less jarring to your system. I think about the late great John Lewis, who said, "We must be ready to make necessary good trouble." It's why troublemakers are not haters. They're not contrarians. They're not trolls. They're not doing the thing that feels tough just because they want to make somebody uncomfortable. They're doing it because they realize this is necessary for the better world that we want, or for the better work that you want to create. So when you have those people in the room, the people who can tell you no, one, they're looking out for you, and they are making sure that you are showing up in the best way possible. It is in your best interest for your friends to be able to tell you no, right? Like they'll keep you from a lot of pain that you might have to deal with if they're not telling you. And Tony's story is absolutely one of those big ones. When you hear any stories around, public figures who fell into some sort of rabbit hole of like addiction, or there's usually enablers. They usually have enablers. But I'm always like, who was the person who was like, I'm gonna try to help them, even though it might cost me the friendship, even though it might cost me the payroll, right? So I just do think, and those of us who are privileged, and I'm not even asking the people who are just on survival mode to do this. Actually, we got to use our power so the people who are living paycheck to paycheck are not the ones putting their job on the line. So the people who have no home are not the ones who are saying and do the right things. Those of us who during COVID were never worried about how we were going to pay our rent. We're never worried about where our next meal was coming from. We're feeling physically safe in our homes. We've got to be the ones using our power and our voice and our access for good.
Yeah. You know what else came to mind when I first started digging into the book? I thought of this quote I heard somewhere. It's the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy, doing nothing, not caring. And to me, that seems like part of the message.
Absolutely. I think love is a verb. I think community is a verb. I think leadership is a verb. And that verb means you're going to have to take some action. Leaders cannot be called leaders if they are not having people behind them who can actually even teach them something. I think leadership shows like vulnerability, willingness to grow, being a forever student. That for me is what a leader is. And same for like a community. A community holds me accountable. They affirm my life, but they also challenge me. They support me, but they also tell me no in the moments when I'm going the direction I shouldn't. And same for love. Like if I say I love you, I need to be able to show that in the way I'm showing up for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe rounding third, coming home on this convo. I'm really loving it so far. This show is called Behind the Brand. We talk about brands. And I think nowadays, especially, people recognize that you have a personal brand, or at least an opportunity to have a personal brand. So what is the Luvvie brand? And how do you define what a brand is?
I think your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Hopefully your brand matches what you will say about yourself when you're not in the room. That's when it's cohesive. That is when it's constructive. That's when you've built something strong. And for me, I think my brand is I am the truth teller. I'm the person who's saying what people are thinking but dare not to say. I'm the professional troublemaker who is, critiquing the world and giving commentary on it. I'm the person who's loaning other people courage by how I show up. I show up authentically as myself. I say the hard things in hopes that other people see it and say, you know what, that's possible for me to do too. I'm not saying become Luvvie. I'm saying become you. Like double down on you and don't apologize for all the dopeness. So yeah, I am the truth teller. I'm the troublemaker, and I am the lover of shoes too. I love shoes.
Oh yeah, I think you can tell a lot about people from their shoes, um, their character. Tell me about your shoes. Do you have a extensive collection? Do you like only wear a certain kind? What is it? What is it about the shoes?
I have an extensive collection of shoes. Man, depends. Very diverse. So, I actually have a shoe account on Instagram called Must Love Shoes that I used to chronicle my shoe closet. I have over 250 pairs. On the sneaker side, I am a fan of the Jordan 1s. They go with everything. I'm also a huge fan of Oxfords and wingtips. And Office of Angela Scott is my favorite brand with those. And then I also love a nice heel, a nice over the knee boot, just sets off an outfit. And Tamara Mellon has some great ones. So I dress myself feet first, and then I figure out the rest of the outfit. And honestly, it is actually part of my brand because whenever I walk in a room now, there are people will actually look at my feet first. They'll be like, I just had to see what shoes you were wearing today. And there have been people who've told me that they remembered meeting me because of the shoes I had on. So now I actually am very cognizant of the shoes I'm wearing because they are a conversation piece. If I'm going to a conference, I'm picking out my shoes first because that's going to have somebody walk up to me and say, oh my God, I love those. I've met so many people from conversations about my shoes.
Yeah, I think now I'm remembering something you were talking to Guy about, that you purposely wore your Jordans to sort of a formal conference to sort of break up the status quo or something.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I will absolutely wear a pair of sneakers just to be like, I know you said this is business casual, but I'm going to show up in these sneakers and still be as excellent as I was going to show up if I had on the Oxfords. And people usually love it.
Yeah. So yeah, so what do your sneakers, how do you feel? Because I feel the same way. Like if I'm having a rough day, I go get a new pair of shoes or I get a fresh cut. I feel like $1,000,000. That's how I recharge. Um, so what do the wingtips say about you when you have the wingtips on, or the Oxfords?
I actually have the shoes right next to me, so I'm going to grab them for you. I'm gonna grab these shoes and they will show you the three versions of me in shoe form. So, here are the Oxfords.
Yeah, yeah.
What I love about these, they're red. I bought these because they match my book cover. They literally are my book. And I think they're slick. I think they're classic. And they just look good. And when you see these, you'll pay attention to these. So
So is that like, when you want to look professional, but like professional, like with a little bit of spice, you put those on?
absolutely, absolutely, you know. And then I have these, which are the Jordan 1s. My husband got these for me when I finished writing my book because this is part of their Fearless collection. And I wrote the Fear Fighter manual, so he was like, that's the perfect shoe. And again, they're red and white patent. It's like, I think red is such a color that speaks to passion, that speaks to energy. Red is a courageous color. And the fact that, huh?
It's part of your brand.
It is absolutely part of my brand. Red has been my favorite color since I was 3 years old. So the fact that I've infused it in all areas of my work, and now people actually think about me when they think of red lipsticks and they see red hats and they'll tag me, and that's when I realize I'm like, my brand is strong. And then I have these boots that were hand painted by this prolific artist called Laolu. He he actually has a TED talk also. He made these for me when my first book came out, and it speaks to my Nigerianness. It has the heart. It has, yeah, my work on it. So those are three shoes I think represent me very well.
How do you talk about your Nigerianness? How do you stay connected in Chicago to your Nigerian roots?
I'm very connected. First of all, there's a huge Nigerian community in Chicago. There's a huge Nigerian community in most places, but Chicago has a large one. I still eat Nigerian food at least twice, 3 times a week. My family's here. And yeah, I don't feel disconnected from my culture ever. I am very much a proud Nigerian girl. And it's in everything I do. It's even in the way I write. It's in the way that I approach life. It's in the idea of collectivism as just part of my core values. So yeah, my Nigerianness is in all things.
And when you go back, have you been back recently to the homeland?
Yep. I last went 2.5 years ago. I took 30 of my friends with me, and we were there for 2 weeks.
Does it resonate over there too? Does it translate as well as it does here? Is it, or is there like a different version of it? Like, when I went, I actually lived in Asia for a while, lived in Japan, and you go over there and there's an adaptation. I'll just throw out like, the hamburger. So over there, it's smaller. They serve it with a side of rice. There's an adaptation. So is there an adaptation between Lovey here in Chicago and then when you go back there, or is it the same?
No, I think it's the same. The only thing that changes is my accent. Because whenever I'm around my people, my accent comes out even more. But no, it's the same work. They get the same version of the book. Although in the UK and in Africa, the book title is slightly different. It's the Fear Fighter Manual, Confessions, Lessons from a Professional Troublemaker. But the content inside is exactly the same. But yeah, no, it's the same thing. So I last went 2.5 years ago. We had an amazing time.
I don't have any exposure to that. My son's best friend, well, they were our neighbors for like a decade. He's from Ghana. His wife's from Portland, Oregon. But he shared a lot of his West African, Ghana's West Africa, right? His West African roots, and smelling the spices from his house and going over there and eating the foods. I would love to learn more about it.
It's West Africa is amazing. The food is amazing. So yeah, we actually did a week in Nigeria, and then we did a week in Ghana. So it was incredible.
Awesome. So final words, maybe to entrepreneurs, either current or future troublemakers.
Yes. So one word that I know is helpful whenever people think about like troublemaking, it's don't think about it as like, oh my God, I have to start doing these big things. I think speaking truth, doing hard things, and choosing courage are moment by moment decisions. So even if we haven't done it in the past, we can do it the next time we are asked to. And I think courage is one of those choices that you have to choose after fear. You cannot have courage without fear first. I think we got the fear part down. We are afraid, and there's no shame in being afraid of these big moments, of these small moments. That's normal. But in those times, you have the opportunity to always choose courage. It means you might have to start that company, even though you're not sure where it's going to go. It means you might have to ask for that raise, even though they might say no. It means you have to challenge that person, even though they might be your boss. But I think it's really important for us to do all these things to get the life that we want to get, to live the audacious lives, to the free lives that we want. So I'm just encouraging anybody who's listening to this, choose courage as much as you can in those small moments and in the big moments, because it's your feelings are necessary, your voice is necessary, your power is necessary, and we need it. We need it to make this world better than we found it.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from, and